Armored truck robbed. Third hit in 6 weeks.
The night Elijah Mercer first looked up from his book and asked my name, his brother's crew was dumping a stolen duffel into the dumpster behind my station. I told him I was Maya. He smiled like he believed me. I smiled like I believed myself. A young black rookie cop, undercover as a weary waitress in Briarwood Heights, infiltrates a crew suspected of orchestrating a string of armored truck robberies. As she edges closer to the ringleader, she falls for his quiet, book-loving brother, who may be the true mastermind, moving pieces from the shadows. Torn between duty and desire, she risks blowing her cover, destroying a neighborhood already on edge, and losing herself. Quick heads up before we jump in. If you're into real stories, strange disappearances, and the kind of truths people try to bury, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell so you don't miss what comes next. All right, let's get into it. The fryer hissed like it had secrets. Grease crackled in a language you learned by ear in Briarwood Heights. Nights at the landing bar were a stack of excuses. A man telling his wife he worked late. A woman telling a man she hadn't decided. A bartender telling all of us his tip jar was a swear jar. The neon script over the door blurred the L into a bleeding streak, so sometimes it just read, "The ending," as if the building couldn't finish its own sentence. I worked the back section under the busted fan because that's where Deshaun Mercer liked to sit with his people. The city had other crews, other corners, but Deshaun ran this stretch of Briarwood like a funeral director. Loud suits, quiet hands, the calm of someone who knows you'll be visiting sooner or later. The landing was his living room. The dumpster outside the kitchen door was his closet. At 9:13 p.m., Deshaun eased into booth 7, a blur of cologne and nettle. 2 of his guys trailed him slugs, the one with the sideways smile, and a younger dude who hadn't earned a nickname yet. They didn't order at first. They watched the door, watched the kitchen pass through, watched me. I put water on the table because soft openings make other things easier. "Look at you," Deshaun said, eyes sliding over the Maya on my tag, like he'd bought the name cheap. "You new or just new to me?" "Been here since Tuesday," I lied. I'd been here 3 weeks, but undercover time always counted different. "What can I start you with?" He leaned back. "Respect and queso fries." "Queso's out," I said. "Cheddar's still alive." He laughed from his throat. "Cheddar then, and wings. Lemon pepper, all flats." "All flats," I repeated, because men like to hear their preferences resurrected. "Anything to drink?" 4 shots of Casa, 4 beers, Slug said. He had hands like a man who'd worked a real job before someone offered him a shortcut. "And you?" "Bars over there," I said lightly. "I don't drink on shift." "Everybody drinks," Slug said. "Everybody lies too," I murmured, and moved away before I could see whether Deshaun liked my mouth or hated it. In the alley a few minutes later, the kitchen door coughed a rectangle of light into the dark. Duke, the bouncer who could crack pecans with his shoulder blades, stepped out to smoke. I followed, hauling a bag of empties. Sirens smudged the distance, the way they always do, like someone dragging a wet finger across glass. A compact silver car nosed into the alley, idled, then reversed slow, like it had changed its mind. I watched without watching. My apron was full of pen stubs and folded receipts, and a tiny black listening device stitched into the seam. Sweat crawled down my back. The air smelled like beer and pennies. "Yo," Duke said, flicking ash. "You good, Maya?" "Just getting air," I said, and meant it. It was the kind of night that collapsed on you. That's when Slug shouldered through the door with a duffel that didn't bounce right. He gave me a look that suggested I had taken a picture with my eyes. "Trash run," he said. "Congratulations," I said. He shoved the bag into the dumpster, metal clanging inside. My blood did that quiet quickening it does when instinct picks up the scent. Duke stubbied his cigarette. Slugs wiped his hands, like he had touched something with a name. When the door swung shut behind them, I leaned against the block wall and counted to 12. Then I counted to 30. Then I went back in. The crew ate, laughed, drummed fingers, checked watches. In the middle of it, the door chimed, and Elijah Mercer walked in alone, no entourage. No jewelry, just a knit beanie and a copy of Invisible Man with frayed corners. Deshaun cut his eyes toward him, a flinch no one else would clock. Elijah nodded back, subtle, and took a seat at the bar, 2 stools away from where Miss Bernadette kept her purse and whispered prayers.
You coming or calling it in?
He looked like Briarwood's soft promise, a teacher who never got the job, a son who carried the groceries, a boy who never learned to mean mug right. I had clocked him 3 times in 3 weeks. Once shelving books at the community store on Linden, once at a bus stop, handing a sandwich to a man whose shoes looked like open mouths, once walking behind Deshaun, hands in pockets, jaw tight like he was chewing on guilt. I told myself he was the safe one. My training told me that safe was often the most dangerous word in English. I delivered wings. Deshaun tapped his glass with his ring. "You ever read?" he asked me. "I can sound out the pictures," I said. He grinned. Behind him, the TV over the bar showed helicopter footage of squad cars clustering along the interstate. A Chiron crawled. Armored truck robbed 3rd hit in 6 weeks. I felt the floor tilt just a little. Slugs didn't look. The young one glanced up and away. Deshaun's eyes never left me. "Elijah!" Deshaun called. "You eating or reading your dinner again?" Elijah's mouth shifted like a smile he didn't want. "Reading," he said, without looking. His voice had that warm scrape you get from talking to a lot of older people. "But I'll take coffee." "Get my brother a coffee," Deshaun said. "Whatever's not burnt." I poured, carried it over. Elijah's thumbs grazed the book's paper like he was counting beads. Up close, his eyelashes were indecent. He had a tiny scar at his hairline, a punctuation mark somebody left there years ago. "Cream?" I asked. "Black's fine," he said, then met my eyes like he was making a decision. "What's your name?" "Maya," I said. "It came out practiced, which is to say it came out wrong. You?" "Elijah." He held the book up. "I've been told this is an optimistic choice for a bar. I like a man with range. Do you?" He smiled for real this time, a line breaking water. "What do you like besides tips and not getting burned by grease?" "Solvable problems," I said, too fast, too true. He cocked his head. I deflected. "I like quiet." "You picked the wrong room," he said, and we both glanced toward booth 7, where the laughter had turned a little tinny, a little too loud. The Chiron on the TV changed. Suspects at large. My handler's last text pinged under my skin, the phone tucked deep in my locker. Stay cool. Eyes on the handoff. Handoff. Dumpster. The duffel's hollow clank. I felt the path connecting. Elijah took a sip. "You live around here, Maya?" "Still figuring that out," I said. Another lie. I lived 2 blocks away in a 2nd-floor walk-up whose windows looked at a brick wall and a single patch of stubborn sky. "You?" "Born and stuck," he said. He hesitated tiny, but there. "Owner at Linden Books. You should come by. It's quiet." My heart showed me an image I didn't ask for. Me standing between paper towers while he talked about a book that had saved him. I folded my face into neutral. Maybe. Behind us, the kitchen door kicked open again. The kid with no nickname brushed past me, his eyes wide with the wrong kind of adrenaline. He left the bar by the side door, headed to the alley. Elijah didn't turn. Neither did Deshawn. I checked Table 8's dwindling fries like they were a moral emergency and fought the itch to follow. At 10:06 p.m., patrol cars cruised past the landing slow, as if the street were a museum exhibit about mistakes. Slugs rose, adjusted his hoodie, and slid a folded receipt into the checkbook. I picked it up a minute later on my route, palming it to the register. My fingers found the crease out of habit. That was where notes lived. A code, if there was one, would live like that too. The crease was too neat. I unfolded it with my pinky, casual. In the corner, in blue pen, someone had written the numbers 1173. Nothing else. Not a table number. Not our menu codes. Not a price. My stomach did a small elevator drop. I tucked it into my apron and brought the check back. Deshawn handed me an extra 20 with the flourish of a man who thinks he's funding the arts. "Stay sweet," he said. "I have cavities," I said, and he laughed just enough. They left through the front, all but the kid, who still hadn't returned from the alley. A minute later, Duke gave me a look, and I went out back like trash, and gravity had just invented me. The alley was empty. The dumpster lid was half caught on something. I slipped gloves on because good girls wash their hands and bad girls leave no prints. In the kitchen, grease talked. Out here, silence did. I lifted the lid slow. The duffel was still there. It smelled like hot metal and glove sweat. I unzipped it an inch, then another 2. My brain gave me the protocol. No hero moves, no deep dive, no fingerprints. Camera if possible, but the camera was in my locker, past Miss Bernadette's watchful eyes. The zipper rasped. Inside, black gloves, matte black ski masks, a drill battery, a spent canister of pepper spray, and a silver patch stitched into the lining. My breath stalled. A tag from First Patriot Armored stitched in like a joke. No cash. No bonds. No obvious loot. Tools. A kit. A door opened above me in the apartment building next door, light spilling down rusted fire escape steps. I closed the bag soft, ran my knuckles down the zipper to lay the teeth flat, and let the lid settle with a sigh. I stepped back and bent to retie a shoe I had no business touching. When I slipped back inside, the bar lights had that post-laughter dim. Deshawn's crew were gone. Elijah still sat at the bar, coffee cooling, book face down. He looked like a man who didn't want to go where he had to go next. "You need anything else?" I asked, heart slow and deliberate now. "Another coffee?" "I'm good," he said. "I should get home. Early morning. Bookstore hours?" "Kids reading circle. Saturday mornings. They always want dinosaurs, and the one about the girl who solves mysteries with her dog." I wanted to ask what he had loved as a kid. I wanted to ask how long he had been the kind of person who made space for small people in a world that narrowed. Instead, I said, "I'm partial to the dog. Who solves mysteries?" He blinked, amused. "You and me both." He pulled bills from his wallet. Old bills folded, not fresh from the bank crisp. "Keep the change. Maybe you'll buy a book." "I'll work on sounding out the pictures," I said. He laughed a surprised sound. "Good night, Maya." "Good night, Elijah." He left. The bell on the door made the same tired sound it made for everyone, regardless of whether they had just coded an entire plan in 3 numbers and a duffel bag. The bathroom smelled like cheap lemon and cheaper mercy. I locked the stall, perched on the toilet lid in my apron, and texted my handler with my left thumb, the phone low and careful. "Found kit in dumpster. No currency." Masks, gloves, drill battery, tag from 1st Patriot Armored sewn inside. Received note 1173. Possible code. Elijah Mercer on scene, alone, bar seat, coffee. Ishan present with slugs, plus unknown. News running 3rd hit. The reply came in 2 pings. Morrow. Do not retrieve the duffel. Patrol sweep incoming. We got a unit 2 blocks away. Stay normal. Who wrote note? M.E. On their check. Slugs past it. Blue ink. No other marks. Morrow. Copy. Secure the note. Hold position until closing. Radio silence unless emergent. Radio silence meant my heartbeat had to count for 2. I flushed for effect, washed my hands, and caught my reflection in the smudged mirror. 23-year-old rookie eyes inside a 30-year-old waitress's fatigue. My real name Janelle felt like a dress in a dry cleaner's bag I wasn't allowed to pick up yet. The academy hadn't smelled like fry oil. The academy had smelled like fear and chlorine and the kind of sweat that meant effort. The academy had told me that undercover work was chess. Briarwood Heights was checkers, but the board was on fire. When I came back out, Miss Bernadette was wiping the bar like it had insulted her in 1987. "You be careful with them boys," she said without looking up. "They got a way of thinking the world is theirs if they smile nice." "I'm invisible," I said. She snorted. "A woman like you ain't invisible nowhere." "What kind of woman am I?" "The kind who makes a decision and then lives with it," she said. "Don't ask me how I know." She swiped the rag again, faster. "And the quiet one? Elijah? He reads a lot to keep from hearing himself." "What's he trying not to hear?" "Family," she said simply. "All of ours are loud." I wanted to lean into that like a couch. Instead, I stocked the napkin holders. At 11:50 p.m., 2 patrol cars finally rolled slow past our block. Duke watched them with the professional contempt of a man who had seen a lot of late arrivals. If the patrol guys saw the dumpster, they didn't show it. I kept my hands steady. Closing time, we sluiced the bar with bleach, cashed out the till, and hauled bags to the alley. The duffel was gone when I peeked. I didn't look long. I didn't need Duke seeing my curiosity in the wild. I walked home under the stubborn sky. Streetlights buzzed like someone had wired them with bees. Linden Books sat dark across from a battered mural of a black girl in a red hoodie reading a book that made her float. I stopped long enough to feel something prick behind my ribs, and then kept on. Upstairs, I stripped the day off, showered until my skin argued, then sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the note. 1173. 3 numbers like 3 doors. I pulled out the file I kept locked in the freezer under a bag of peas that were now decorative. My notes, dates, times, faces, armored truck routes, security rotations. The last 2 hits had occurred on Fridays. The truck slowed at the ramp to I-83 near the stadium. Perfect line of sight down the turn. An employee's cousin's boyfriend happened to be nearby. The broadcast earlier said, 3rd hit, but the first robbery had never been claimed, like a practice run. Like a man picking up a heavy weight just to see. My handler said to sleep when I could. I turned off the light and lay there watching my ceiling make suburb shapes. The numbers glowed when I closed my eyes, reforming into combinations. November 7th at 3, 11 minutes, 7 seconds, 3 blocks? Or is it a book code, page 11, line 7, word 3? The way nerds hid in plain sight. The way a boy in a beanie slipped a library into his pockets. I rolled onto my side and told my body to be quiet. The city outside never listened. Morning rushed in mean, sunlight like a dare. I put my face on cheap eyeliner. Cheaper lip pulled my curls into a ponytail that read, "I'm too tired to be mysterious," and headed downstairs. Miss Laney from 2B was smoking on the stoop in a housecoat that said she had been married. widowed and fed up with men in a straight line. She watched me like I was her daytime soap. "You going to that job, Maya?" she asked. "For my sins," I said. "Your sins got good benefits?" She cackled, then lowered her voice. "You watch those Mercer boys. Their mama was an usher at my church. She cried pretty and deep. Me, I never learned how to do that quiet." "What happened to her?" I asked. "God took her early," she said. "Cancer's a thief." After that, Deshaun got steel in him. Elijah got books in him. Both of them got guns in their ear. She turned her face to the street. Neighborhood knows the difference. I walked away with that sentence jogging beside me. At the landing, I tied on my blue apron. Saturday mornings were gentler. Hangover eggs, children with syrup voices, fathers who had no idea how to part hair, and me, carrying coffee like sacrament. By noon, I found myself on Linden Avenue, telling myself it was because I needed plastic wrap from Corey's corner store. But I kept walking past Corey's, and the tiny bell over the door at Linden Books made a sound that felt like a clean sheet pulled tight. Inside smelled like ink and dust and good intentions. Paper towers leaned in conversation. A chalkboard sign by the door read, "Story time at 10 IME to date. Like last week, Mr. Daniels," in handwriting that understood forgiveness. A girl in a yellow dress stood by the graphic novels, checking the back covers like they might have coins in them. Elijah was behind the counter, printing labels that looked cleaner than his soul probably felt last night. He saw me and set the labels down. "You came," he said softly. "You said it was quiet." "It is," he said, "except when it isn't." He nodded toward the back, where a group of kids sat crisscross on a rug, still arguing whether a velociraptor could ride a bike. "I'm on break," I said, as if I were telling the truth. "Figured I'd try out literacy. Big step," he said gravely. "Start small." He came around the counter and reached past me for a slim paperback on the staff picks shelf. His arm grazed mine. "Here." I read the title, Citizen, an American lyric. "Poems?" "Something like it," he said. "They feel like thoughts you had driving, that you didn't know were poems until somebody else wrote them down." I flipped it open, and my eyes snagged on a line about invisible weight. My throat did a small, involuntary thing. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, even though sometimes the language found you before you were fully dressed for it. "How much?" "For you?" he considered. 10 and a promise you'll come back and tell me if it hurt." "I promise." He wrapped it in brown paper and twined it with red string. The string made me ridiculous. He slid it across the counter like contraband. "Hey, Eli." A voice called from the doorway. I looked up, my hand on the book like a palm over my heart. Deshaun stood framed in sunlight, a grin made for cameras on his face. 2 of his guys lingered behind him. They carried the air outside in with them, gasoline, excitement, expensive laundry detergent. "Busy day at the library?" Deshaun asked. "I'm trying to get my mind right." He clapped Elijah's shoulder. "Help your big brother find a good read." Elijah didn't flinch, but something in his posture tightened. "How about something slim enough you'll finish?" he said. "I'll start you easy." "Man said I'm slow," Deshaun told the store like it was a party. He moved closer to me, eyes flicking to the wrapped package. "Maya, right? I didn't take you for a book girl." "I'm working on sounding out the pictures," I deadpanned. He laughed, this time for real. "You're funny." The kid without a nickname wandered toward the history section and knocked a spine with his knuckle, like he had never been left alone with books before. Slugs leaned against a shelf, scanning the ceiling, the corners, the door. My body cataloged all of it, while the rest of me pretended to consider a novel. "What you reading?" Deshaun asked Elijah. "Baldwin," Elijah said. "I'll put it on your tab." "Look at my brother, acting like he a grown man," Deshaun said loud. the way men do when the room isn't big enough for both of their pasts. He slipped a folded receipt across the counter. My skin prickled. Elijah didn't look down at first. Then he did. His face stayed smooth. He slid the receipt under a coaster like it was nothing but condensation. I stared at the red string around my book and wondered if my heart had climbed inside it. Ishan bought nothing, of course. He left after telling a woman by the door her baby had his uncle's eyebrows, which was both impossible and the point. The bell made another tired sound. The shop exhaled. Elijah let the coaster sit a full minute before he lifted it. The receipt had writing in blue ink again. 1173. Same hand, same numbers. My brain mapped non-coincidences. He caught me looking, and for a second that stretched like gum between teeth, we just stared at each other, as if we both had to decide, again, who the other was. Then he slid the receipt into his pocket, returned to the counter, and asked, too casually, "You got work later?" "Always," I said. He nodded. "There's a jazz thing at Earl's tonight. If you like sound, starts at 9. You going?" "I might," he said. I weighed the invitation the way you weigh your own bones. "Maybe I'll stop by." "Maybe," he repeated, and the word did more work than it had a right to. I told myself I went to Earl's because Undercover is about embeddedness being where people are, knowing the rhythms, absorbing the false chores of a place. I told myself I went because my handler would want eyes, and because the duffel had lit a fuse, and I wanted to see where the smoke pooled. But when I pushed the door open, and the trumpet braided with the smell of sweat and wood polish and spilled beer, I knew I had also come because of the way Elijah said, maybe like it was a rope. He wasn't at the bar when I came in. Couples swayed in that loose shoulder way Briarwood had perfected less dancing than leaning on music. Earl himself polished a glass, so slowly the glass might have dissolved under his patience. I took a stool, ordered water with lime, and watched a man in a gray cap play the keys with a tenderness that made me want to put my head down on the bar and sleep for a week. "Heads up," Earl murmured after a while, not looking at me. "Mercer's in the door." Deshawn entered like he liked the way the room stood up straight when he did. Slugs flanked him. Elijah trailed, which meant he led from behind. He saw me, and that look again, the flicker between decision and decision's shadow. He tipped his chin. I tipped mine. They took the table by the stage, the one everybody pretended not to want, because it meant your back had to face someone's door. Men came by to shake Deshawn's hand. A woman in a green dress sat in his lap and then thought better of it. Slugs leaned in to say something that gusseted the laughter stronger, more obscene. Elijah watched the pianist's hands the way some men watched fighters. At 9:47 p.m., the back door opened a crack. A man slid in, did not remove his hoodie, made a line straight toward Elijah, and said something that lifted all their faces like someone had pulled a string. Deshawn's lips peeled back from his teeth. He rose in a single movement so fluid, it was almost polite. Slugs stood too. The music covered the sound of chairs scooting. They didn't run. They left at a pace that said everything important had already happened somewhere else. Elijah hung back half a beat. He looked at me like we were both under a thin glass. Then he turned and followed his brother. I counted to 5, paid Earl with a thanks that meant something else, and slipped out the side door. The night outside had cracked colder. I tucked my hands in my jacket and moved down the alley like I had always belonged there. Their car's taillights glowed at the end of the block, then snapped off. They had taken a right on Dexter. I cut to Linden, moving through shadows, avoiding the pools of streetlight that flattened you. On the corner by the mural, a black SUV idled, not theirs. Windows tinted poorly, tires too new. Watching, my scalp tickled. It smelled like surveillance and tension, and a man who didn't grow up here. My spine told me to shrink. My training told me to file it, to keep moving, to not under any circumstance look too long. I didn't, but I felt it there, the way you feel a bruise before your fingers find it. I crossed the street and let the SUV sit without me. In the distance, I heard sirens, the urgent kind, the kind that get you up off the couch. I moved faster. By the time I reached the landing, it was too late for food and too early for regret. Inside, Duke was setting up chairs for the late crowd. He looked surprised to see me, but didn't ask why I was early. "Hey, Maya," he said. "Miss Bernadette's running behind. You mind restocking the well?" "Sure," I said, grateful for the distraction, grateful for something practical to do with my hands, while my brain built red string webs out of nothing. But nothing has a shape if you learn it long enough. At 10:22 p.m., a text from Morrow pinged. "Possible meet in your alley. 2 unknowns. Stay inside. Do not engage." I put the vodka bottle down slow. Duke glanced at me. "You good?" "Yeah," I lied. "Bathroom." In the hall, I pressed my ear to the back door. Voices drifted the alley, magnified sound like a cheap hall. One voice tense, local. One voice smooth, too smooth. A clink like metal touching metal. "We said Sunday," the tense voice hissed. Sunday moved. The smooth voice replied. 1173. The numbers slid under the door like smoke. I pressed my palm to the wood to keep from pushing. The smooth voice went on. "If you miss the window, there won't be a window. There'll be a wall. Footsteps. A scrape. Silence." I eased back just as the kitchen door swung open, and Miss Bernadette barreled in with a grocery bag and a report about her granddaughter's science fair volcano. I blinked my face normal and nodded in the right places. When I got a breath, I texted Morrow. Heard the code. Smooth voice said, 1173. Sunday moved. Window versus wall. SUV on Linden watching earlier. Might be Fed or private. The Sean plus Elijah left Earls abruptly. Handoff or pivot. Morrow. Stay put. If they're moving up, we need eyes, not heroes. Also, Rusk wants a heads up before we burn any sources, so play it colder than you like. Rusk. Captain Rusk, who didn't like my face because it reminded him he couldn't outpace the city changing. Rusk, who supervised 3 squads and 6 grudges. I breathed through the instinct to text something I'd regret. At 11:03 p.m., the alley door opened again. I pivoted with a tray, as if I had just come through. Elijah stood there, hood up, his eyes searching the kitchen for something that wasn't on the menu. He looked at me, a question anchoring his face. "Hey," he said, breath a little white. Do you have a first aid kit?" Duke looked up from slicing limes. "What you do?" "Nothing," Elijah said. A kid on the block wiped out on his bike. "You lying sweet," Miss Bernadette muttered, already reaching under the counter for the battered tin. "Here, don't steal my scissors." "I would never," he said, and the lie and the truth braided in his mouth like rope. He turned to me. "Maya," he added, too softly for anyone else. Can you walk with me?" "It's dark." I paused the exact right amount, the amount that signaled this was not a date and I was not an idiot. 5 minutes, I said. I looked at Duke. "Bathroom break?" 2 minutes, he said. 3, I negotiated. 2.5. We stepped into the alley. The cold hit my throat. He walked fast, first aid kit under his arm like a book. At the end of the alley, he slowed, then stopped, then turned. The kit pressed suddenly to my chest, like he was trying to give me a heartbeat. "What are you doing here?" He whispered, and the question contained 12 others. "I work here," I said, aiming for light. "I told you." He shook his head. "No. What are you doing here?" We stood in a slice of shadow between the dumpster and the wall. The street hummed. There could be someone in every car. recording us. There could be nobody. Buying a book, I said, drinking water, watching a band, carrying bandages for your imaginary kid. He stepped closer. I felt the heat coming off his jacket like a second weather. Deshaun thinks you're a mouthy waitress. Slugs thinks you're cute. I think you're a better liar than that. I considered pulling the badge from my bra like a playing card. I considered telling him something that would save both of us a lot of calories. I considered the math. If he already knew, say nothing and let him say it. If he didn't, say nothing and let him be wrong. If I'm a liar, I said quietly, what am I lying about? He exhaled, fog lifting past my ear. Caring. That's the one thing I'm bad at lying about, I said, before I could catch it. We looked at each other for a time that had nothing to do with clocks. He lowered the first aid kit. Sunday moved, he said finally, as if I'd asked. Whatever you're not telling me, tell the person who needs to know it. Who's that? I asked. He smiled without joy. The one who keeps you alive. He walked away without waiting for my answer. His shoulders pulled tight, the first aid kit bumping his thigh like a second thought. I watched him go, and the numbers danced on the brick wall, painting themselves in blue marker, 1173. Hours blur in a bar. Nights do the same work. The second shift dragged itself belly first across the floor. I counted tips. I counted smiles. I counted how many times men said sweetheart with hands that shook. At 1:37 a.m. appeared. Slugs reappeared, sat at the end of the bar like a man who wanted a drink to taste like victory and found water instead. You see my boy? He asked. Elijah? I said. He was here. He's funny, Slugs said, and laughed in a way that meant he did not find him funny at all. Man likes books, like books going to stop a bullet. He tapped the bar with 2 fingers. Code or nervousness or both. You like him? I kept my face a picture of blank. I like tips. Girl like you should like better than that, he said. Girl like me has rent. He leaned closer, breath cloying. I could take care of your rent. I don't do charity. Who said charity? Slugs asked, and then he placed a folded receipt on the bar, very precisely, very quietly. He slid it toward me with 1 finger. I stared at it, then at him. He smiled a slow sideways thing that didn't reach his eyes. I picked up the paper with 2 fingers like it might burn, unfolded it halfway. Blue ink. Again, a single line. Kitchen door. Sunday, the 3rd of July, 11. Is this a pickup line? I asked. Something like it, Slugs said, and then his smile guttered. You're cute. Be smart. He left faster than he had entered, like he didn't want to be in the same light as his own warning. I tucked the paper into my apron with hands that didn't belong to anyone. I closed the bar with Miss Bernadette and Duke, counted out the drawer, and locked the side door with the weight of a small animal in my chest. In the alley, the dumpster lid sat, crooked like a mouth, saying, oh, the cold had sharpened. I walked home along Linden, scanning the edges, feeling watched and unkind and alive. The SUV was gone. The mural girl floated above me, holding her book steady. Back at the apartment, I pulled the receipt from my apron and laid it beside the first. I looked at them like a pair of eyes. I texted Morrow. They're moving Sunday. Code repeated. Kitchen door. Slugs delivered warning ambiguous. Elijah knows more than he says, and he knows I'm something. Morrow. Copy. Sit tight. We'll set surveillance for Sunday. Rusk wants us hand off to robbery. I want it clean. You don't go cowboy. Me. I'm not the one with a horse. Morrow. Funny. Get 4 hours sleep. You're up at 10 to shop at the farmer's market. You might see an old friend. Me. Which kind? Morrow. The kind who wears a badge under his hoodie and thinks it makes him invisible. I set my phone down and stared at the ceiling until sleep took me by the jaw. The farmer's market on Briarwood Boulevard was more folding tables than farmers. Grandmothers sold collards next to teenagers flipping bootleg DVDs. A man in a dashiki had oils named after famous people Beyoncé, Barack, Basquiat, and swore each one cured heartbreak. I bought an apple because it felt like an alibi. I saw him near the flower stand, pretending to choose a bouquet while his eyes did math. Detective Patrice Morrowgrade's tucked back, leather jacket that had seen a lot of concrete, gaze like a leveled spirit level. She looked like somebody's auntie and somebody's problem. "You look wholesome," she said without greeting, picking up a bunch of carnations she had no intention of buying. "How's your little job?" "Pays the sins," I said, then handed her the duplicated note. "They're using a code. Might be time, might be coordinates. Sunday's moved. Kitchen door." Morrow scanned the paper the way a woman reads a man's silence. 1173 could be a shift code, could be a bank code, could be page line word. She squinted at me. "Tell me something honest." "I like him," I said. Morrow didn't blink. "Which him?" "Elijah." She sighed, the kind of sigh that dragged out a chair. "Of course you do. You like quiet ones with complicated eyes. All rookies do. What does he like?" "Books, kids, the feeling of making up for something." "That's a lot of likes," she said. "What about his dislikes?" "Noise," I said. "And lies." "Nobody in Briarwood gets both those," Morrow said. "We're going to stage a garbage pickup on Sunday. We'll run a city truck and a second unit. I want you to be a waitress. I want you to be Maya. No heroics, Janelle." "Okay," I said. "You think the big brother is the face." She tilted her head. "What's the little one?" "I don't know yet," I said, and the not knowing thrummed in me like a low-grade fever. A finger, a pulse. "A book spine," Morrow offered, "strong in the middle. Looks soft until you need it to hold the whole thing together." I nodded. "Something like that." Above us, a kid tugged at his mother's sleeve and demanded a balloon shaped like a sword. The mother rolled her eyes, paid the balloon man, and then scolded the kid when he immediately hit himself in the face with it. We both watched. The city was silly and lethal, and ours. Morrow tucked the notes into her jacket. "Be ready tonight anyway," she said. "They moved Sunday, but planning smells like Friday. They test, they press. I want you ready if the test comes to your door." "I'm always ready," I said. She gave me a look that said she had once said the same thing to someone who didn't come home from it. "Buy yourself some flowers," she said, handing me the carnations. "Pretend someone else did." I took them. The sun slid away like a slipped promise. Evening draped itself over Briarwood, soft until it wasn't. I tied on my apron, tucked my hair, checked my seams for wires I wasn't wearing tonight, because the last thing I needed was static. At 8:20, Elijah walked in. He didn't go to the bar. He went to booth 3, the one tucked into a corner where you could see both exits. He ordered coffee and a grilled cheese and read a book about islands that don't exist until people collectively believe in them. He did not look at me when I took the order or when I set the plate down. He kept not looking at me for 10 minutes, then 15, like he was proving something to both of us. At 8:40, Deshawn arrived with a stranger's smooth hair, expensive shoes that tried too hard to appear old. The stranger's smile was a negotiation. He sat at booth 7 with Deshawn and Slugs, and the kid who still had no name, and he spoke in a voice that had frightened people who couldn't admit to fear. The stranger never looked at the kitchen door, which is how I knew he was thinking about it. At 9:01, the TV ran a story about increased armored patrols. The stranger smiled without his eyes. He placed a postcard on the table, Linden Book's name on it, a drawing of a stack tied with string, and slid it toward Deshawn. They didn't flip it. They just let it sit there between them like a dare. My skin went tight. My whole damn body went tight. At 9:13, the alley door opened, and a city garbage truck groaned into the mouth of the alley. Unplanned, unscheduled, unintelligible. Duke raised an eyebrow at me. I nodded once, as if telling him a weather forecast. The garbage truck's brakes squealed like a confession. Men shouted. Something clanged. My phone buzzed a single vibration. Morrow, we're early. Test run. Don't react. In the corner, Elijah closed his book. He looked down at his hands for a long second, then lifted his gaze to mine. I had seen men look at me like invitations, like meals, like problems. This wasn't that. This was the look you give a person when you're about to step into a street and hope they pull you back at the right moment. The kitchen door swung. Cold came in. Slugs rose. The stranger's hand paused on the postcard, tapped once. 1, 2, 3. The code rewrote itself under my tongue. Duke, I said, too calm. We're out of lemons. We ain't, he said. I'll check anyway, I said. He gave me a look that said he had watched daughters lie nicer than me and lived to tell it. He nodded toward the door. 2 minutes, he said. The alley was a sermon loud, necessary. The garbage men argued about roots. The dumpster shook like a horse tossing a fly. I kept my face bored. I put my hands on my hips like someone's auntie. I took 3 steps toward the dumpster and felt a presence step out of the dark to my left. Wrong night for trash, the smooth voice said. Every night's trash night in Briarwood, I said without turning, because prey runs, and I was many things, but not that. 1173, he said, testing it on the air between us. Mean something to you? I like prawn numbers, I said. 7 is, he said conversationally. 11 is. 3 is. We like the clean ones. No messy divisors. I turned my head. The stranger from booth 7 stood not even an arm's length away, his smile tucked in like a weapon not yet drawn. Up close, he had a faint scar where a ring must have caught his cheek once. His eyes were empty in the way of men who had built walls careful enough that nothing even echoed. You a mathematician now? I asked. I'm a man who likes rhythm, he said. 3 beats, a pause. 7 steps, a turn. 11 minutes before a patrol shift. Lots of ways to get hurt. Sounds like you should be a drummer, I said. Maybe I already am. He nodded toward the dumpster. You got anything in there I should know about? Old fries, broken glass, dreams, I said. What do you think is in there? What I need there to be, he said, and then he moved past me with the ease of a man walking a dog on a street he paid taxes on. He lifted the lid, looked, and let it fall. It thudded like a verdict. Not yet, he said. Sunday, then. He looked at me, gaze curious in a clinical way. What's your name? Maya, I said, letting each letter be very clear. Maya, he repeated. You keep your head down Sunday. Kitchen doors can be dangerous. Men like doors more than they should, I said. Men like exits, he corrected, and turned, disappearing into the bar as if he had never been outside at all. I stood a second longer, long enough to hate him, long enough to hate the part of me that admired the neatness of his lines. Then I pulled the door open and stepped back into the noise, into the light, into the heat. Elijah was gone from booth 3. The postcard was gone from booth 7. Deshaun and Slugs laughed too loud. The TV showed a dog rescuing another dog from a pool, because America loved a metaphor you could pat. I picked up empty glasses and refilled waters and answered a woman's question about gluten, like my life was small. Inside my rib cage, a heart beat against its leash. On Sunday, it told me the leash might break. I looked up to see Elijah at the bar, holding a napkin folded into a square. He slid it toward me without touching my hand. I unfolded it. In block letters, printed neat, it read, Don't be in the alley Sunday. If you see me there, you didn't. My mouth went dry. I looked up, but he had already turned away, disappearing into the crowd like he'd learned how to dissolve. Miss Bernadette leaned in. "You okay, baby?" "I'm fine," I said. "You're lying," she said. "I'm practiced," I said. She patted my hand anyway. "Practice telling the truth next time." When my shift ended, the night had turned the color of a bruise, and Briarwood hummed like a machine kept running by people who couldn't afford to turn it off. I walked home alone, the note warm in my pocket, the streets thick with their own logic. In my apartment, I stood at the sink and drank tap water like it was medicine. I laid the napkin with the receipts and thought about the number of ways a door could open onto a wall. I texted Morrow. He told me not to be in the alley Sunday. If I see him there, I didn't. Stranger knows code, educated, calm, wears civility like Kevlar. Deshaun is a face. Elijah is something else. And I think there's someone else behind both. Someone who likes rhythm more than money. Morrow, eyes open, hands closed. Tomorrow we stage a sweep. If they dance, we cut the music. You sleep at all? I'll sleep when the board stops tilting. Morrow, rookie poetry. Get some rest. I lay down and watched the ceiling draw lines I couldn't yet connect. Somewhere in the building, a couple fought and then made up and then fought again. The city breathed. When I drifted, I dreamt a book with a lock where the title should be, and a boy with quiet eyes offering me the key and telling me I would not like what I found. I woke before the alarm, heart running, the morning already leaning forward into Sunday. The numbers hovered above me, relentless, clean, 173, a rhythm, a code, a choice. And outside, somewhere I could not yet see, doors were being measured. Sunday was still 2 days away, but in Briarwood Heights, anticipation had a smell warm asphalt, cold metal, and the faint tang of adrenaline coming off people who didn't even know they were nervous. By noon on Friday, I had done what Morrow told me, eyes open, hands closed. But that didn't stop the itch under my skin, the one that whispered, if you wait for them, you'll be late. I spent the morning at the landing, wiping tables that were already clean, checking salt shakers like they held secrets. Miss Bernadette didn't comment, which was her way of saying she was watching me harder than usual. By 1 o'clock, the first hint of movement came Deshaun, swaggering in with slugs, and the kid Dash, who Dash had Dash, no Dash name. They didn't sit in their usual booth. Instead, they took one by the window, blinds angled so they could watch the street. It wasn't a meal stop, it was a stack out in daylight. "You're early," I said, bringing water. "Time's a flat circle," Deshaun said, smiling like he'd swallowed something bitter and was daring me to notice. And I got errands. Slugs gave me a slow blink, then leaned forward. "You work Sunday?" "Every Sunday," I said. "Why?" He shrugged. "Kitchen gets cold in the morning. Make sure you're here on time." A deliberate choice of words. Morrow's voice echoed in my head. They test. They press. When I came back with menus they didn't need, Elijah was outside, standing on the curb, reading a book. From inside the glass, it looked like a normal afternoon scene man killing time while his brother talked business. But I could tell from the set of his shoulders he wasn't reading a damn thing. I stepped outside under the pretense of wiping the door glass. "You're early too," I said. He didn't look up from the page. "Sometimes I like to see how the day starts. You see anything interesting?" His eyes flicked toward the window where Deshaun sat, then back to me. "Just wondering if you know what you're standing next to." The words were quiet, but they hit like cold water. "You mean the landing?" "I mean a fuse," he said. "And I don't think you're as far from it as you think you are." Before I could answer, Slugs wrapped the glass from inside, motioning him in. Elijah closed the book without marking the page and went inside. I stayed where I was, pretending to polish until they were all seated together, 3 heads bent over something I couldn't see. That night, I met Morrow in the back of a laundromat 3 blocks over, our usual dead drop location. The air smelled like bleach and hot fabric. She didn't waste time. We got confirmation the armored truck they're watching makes a brief, unscheduled stop near the stadium on Sundays now. Maintenance window. 7 minutes, sometimes less. Security cameras aren't positioned right. Perfect blind spot. 1173, I said. Morrow nodded. Timing sequence. 11 minutes before the stop, they position. 7 minutes to load. 3 to clear out. That's tight. They've done it before. She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single brass key with a piece of masking tape on it that read, "Back." "Kitchen door," I said. She tilted her head. "Exactly. We need eyes from inside the alley when they set up. We can't risk obvious surveillance. If they spot a tail, they'll abort. I want you in place but clean." "And Elijah?" I asked before I could stop myself. "Your feelings for him are a liability," Morrow said flatly. "If he's involved, he's a suspect. If he's innocent, he's a distraction. Either way, you keep your head." Her tone was sharp enough to cut something inside me. Saturday night, Elijah showed up at the bar again, alone. Same booth as before, same black coffee. I'd told myself not to engage, but when his eyes found mine, it was like gravity remembered me. "You here tomorrow?" he asked when I dropped off the mug. I hesitated. "Yeah." He nodded, then leaned in just enough that I could smell the faint trace of paper and cedar. "Stay inside after 10. "That's specific," I said. "That's me," he said. Specific. I wanted to ask him if he was part of it. I wanted to ask if he was trying to protect me or himself. But his gaze was the kind that kept you from asking questions you weren't ready to hear answered. He left after finishing half his coffee, leaving a folded napkin under the mug. This one didn't have numbers. Just a single word, window. Sunday morning arrived, cold and gray. The streets had that emptiness before something big like the neighborhood knew to keep its head down. At 9:30, the back door key Morrow gave me slid into the lock without a sound. The kitchen was quiet. Duke wouldn't be in for another hour. I took my position by the narrow window overlooking the alley. At 10:05, a dark sedan rolled up. Slugs got out first, scanned the street, then popped the trunk. The kid with no name followed, carrying a black bag. Then Elijah stepped out. No book this time, no beanie, just a black jacket zipped to the throat. He didn't look at the kitchen door, but I swear his pace slowed as he passed it. They moved to the dumpster, popped the lid, and started pulling out what looked like bundles of cloth. But even from this distance, I could tell they were the same ski masks and gloves from the duffel I'd seen days ago. A fourth man emerged from the sedan, the stranger from booth 7. He carried a clipboard, checking his watch every few seconds. I fished out my phone and typed a message to Morrow. "All players present. Window open. 11 starts now." Before I could hit send, Elijah glanced toward the window. Our eyes met through the narrow glass. He didn't flinch. He just gave the smallest shake of his head, like he was warning me again. Then he mouthed something. 3 words. "Not their job." The clipboard man barked something I couldn't hear, and they all piled back into the sedan. Tires squealed. I hit send. Morrow's reply came almost instantly. Follow from a distance. "We're moving." I grabbed my coat, my apron still tied around my waist, and slipped out the side door into a city that suddenly felt smaller and sharper. Because if Elijah was telling the truth, then Sunday's job didn't belong to Deshawn's crew. It belonged to someone worse. The sedan was already 2 blocks ahead when I stepped into the street. The air had that electric bite, the kind that tells you a line's about to be crossed. I kept my distance, trailing down Linden in bursts, ducking behind delivery vans and busted newsstands. Every few steps, I checked reflections shop windows, car mirrors, making sure I wasn't the one being followed. The sedan slowed near an old warehouse with faded lettering for a steel supply company. The place had been closed for renovations for years, but the neighborhood whispered about what really went on inside unmarked shipments. Odd hours, doors that opened for the right knock. I ducked into the recessed doorway of a bodega across the street. From here, I could see Slugs and the kid unloading the black bag, handing it to the stranger with the clipboard. Elijah stood slightly apart, head tilted toward the sky, like he was listening for something. Then my burner buzzed. Morrow. We see them. Perimeters loose. Wait for green. The clipboard man checked his watch. 11 minutes before the armored truck stadium stop. Perfect timing. The green never came. Instead, at the 8-minute mark, another vehicle rolled up a matte gray SUV, no plates. 4 men got out, heavy coats, heavier steps. Not Deshawn's crew. Not ours. Elijah saw them first. His jaw tightened. He moved toward the sedan, but the clipboard man caught his arm. Words were exchanged, sharp, fast. Slug stepped in, looking between both groups like he'd walked into the wrong house party. Then it shifted quick, ugly. One of the new men lifted his coat just enough to show steel. The clipboard man raised both hands. The bag changed hands in a way that said this wasn't a negotiation anymore. My phone buzzed again. Morrow. Abort. Too many unknowns. Fall back. But my eyes were on Elijah. He waited until the bag was in the SUV, then turned away, heading toward the side of the warehouse. Not running, but moving like he had a place to be that nobody had sanctioned. I made my choice. The side alley smelled like damp metal and oil. Elijah was halfway down, crouched at a rusted door with a padlock. You're bad at listening, I said. He didn't startle. So are you. He kept working at the lock with something small and silver. What's in the bag? Not cash. The lock clicked open. He pushed the door enough to slide inside, looked back at me. You coming or calling it in? I stepped in. Inside was a narrow corridor lit by a single bare bulb. Boxes lined the walls, labels for electrical equipment, though the weight inside was wrong when my hand brushed one. Elijah led us to a second door, already ajar. The room beyond was colder, cleaner. Racks of military-grade rifles, stacks of unmarked crates. A wall map with routes marked in red grease pencil, all leading to the same point, the stadium. This isn't Deshawn's, Elijah said quietly. This is bigger. He's just cover. A familiar face for the neighborhood, while someone else moves the real product. And you? I've been trying to find proof before they kill him. Or me. His eyes held mine. You're police. It wasn't a question. Before I could answer, voices echoed from the hall. Heavy boots. The SUV crew. We had seconds. Elijah crossed to the map, ripped it from the wall, rolled it tight. Back door, he said. We moved fast, weaving through stacks until we found a service exit. It opened into the rear lot empty, except for a row of dented dumpsters. We ducked behind one as the SUV men entered the building. Sirens, faint but growing, led into the air. That you? He asked. Not me, I said. Morrow. He gave a small nod, almost a smile. Good. We split at the corner, him toward Linden, me toward the market where Morrow's unmarked was idling. I slid into the passenger seat, heart still sprinting. Well? She asked. They've been using Deshawn's crew as camouflage, I said. Real operators are ex-military, moving arms. Stadium drop was today. Her knuckles whitened on the wheel. And Mercer? Which one? The quiet one you're too close to. I looked out the window, catching a glimpse of Elijah disappearing into the crowd, the rolled map under his arm, still deciding. By nightfall, The news was running footage of the raid-blurred faces, crates being loaded into evidence trucks. No mention of Deshawn. No mention of Elijah. The official line was an ongoing investigation. At the landing, business went on. Miss Bernadette poured drinks like nothing had happened. Duke watched the door, expression unreadable. I took my station, poured coffee, cleared tables. At closing, I found a book at booth 3, Invisible Man, with a folded page. Inside was a napkin. 3 words, written in neat block letters. The door's still open. What you just heard wasn't the full story. It was the part someone tried to bury. The part that didn't fit the headline. The part where a person, not a suspect, was lost in the process. This case showed us what happens when the system moves too fast, or not at all. When suspicion weighs more than truth. When justice shows up late, or never. But here's the thing. If these stories don't leave us asking questions, they'll keep repeating with different names. So if this one meant something to you, don't just move on. Talk about it, question it, pass it on. Because silence protects the wrong side of history. And sometimes, the only thing standing between truth and erasure is someone who chooses to care. Like, share, comment. Let the next chapter begin with awareness, not regret.